So I've been involved in the kind of internet arena for a long, long time. I was one of the first people to get a very, very simple holding page up. And I don't know how many of you have actually got your own websites. Got websites, most of it, or not? No? Okay. I had the foresight to put up a little holding page that all it said was Ron Holland, and at that time, not the phone number, but my pager number. We had those little pages on our belt, beep, 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 beep. So I put up my name and my pager number and a bit about what I do, and suddenly my pager started going off. This was quite a few years ago, the real beginning of the internet. Pager kept going off, beep, 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 beep. I looked at it, there's a message there, please call Muna Pabari urgently. And I thought, I don't know Muna Pabari, just ignored it. So a few weeks later, beep, 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 phone Muna Pabari urgently. I thought, what's going on here? This guy must be trying to sell me something. So I ignored it. Week later, right? How many times do you have to hear something? Phone Muna Pabari urgently. I thought, well, I'm going to squeeze the spot. I'm going to put an end to this. So I picked up the phone, and not aggressively, but in a nice manner. I said, look, you keep beep, beep, beeping me. What are you trying to sell me? Get right to the point. What is it? A photocopy, a fax machine? What are you trying to sell me? No. He says, I'm not trying to sell you anything. He says, I've read your book. I'm going to plug it now. Turbo Success. I've read your book, Turbo Success. And he said, I loved it, and I tracked you down on the internet. And he said, I'd really like to come and meet you. So I thought, well, I don't know if I want to meet this guy or not. And then a little voice went off in the back of my head. I actually heard it. It went, success comes in the back door. So when I heard this little voice, I said, come into my boardroom and have a chat with me, right? And he came along, we had a cup of coffee. And at the time, I had loads of projects. I had a lovely boardroom on Chancery Lane, big boardroom, 3,000 square feet offices, big boardroom. He came in there, had a coffee, and he wanted to know everything that I was doing. So I told him all the projects I had on the go. I was doing this, I was doing that. And he said, I might be able to fit into one of those projects. Don't really know where, but he said, I might be able to fit in. So anyway, when he went, what do you think I thought? What do you think I thought? I'll never see him again, right? I'll never see him again. I've had a meeting, I've had a cup of coffee, and off he's gone. A few weeks later, this time he's not on my pager, he's actually phoned me up. He said, Muna Pabari here. He said, you know that one of those companies you were talking about? He said, I've got somebody I think might like to invest in it. So I said, well, if that's the case, you really think you've got an investor? I said, tell him I'll take him out to dinner. I'll take you as well, the three of us will go to dinner. So I took this guy, Muna Pabari, this other guy called Charles. Long story short, Charles wrote a check out for 500k. Is that a nice little story from the internet, just by having a little holding page up there? Has anybody had a nice little success story like that? That's a good one, isn't it?
Not yet.
No. Okay, so that was a nice little story. What I really talk to people about is for 30 years now, I've been a published author for 34 years, I talk about mind power techniques. And I know quite a few of you have heard of me and read of my books. But I talk about mind power techniques and making things happen. And I want to tell you the story of how I got my first Rolls Royce. Right, young man driving around in a beaten up old Ford Escort, and this was what they called the original Dagenham dustbin. I used to drive around with the windows rolled down, right, in the summer and the winter, and everybody thought I was cool, right? But the reason why I drove around in the Ford Escort with the windows rolled down, why? Because they wouldn't roll up, right? So the windows were down all the time. This was a summer's day, and I decided to turn the Ford Escort into a Rolls Royce. And I knew I had to program my mind to make this happen. So everywhere I went, I got in the habit of telling my brain, telling my mind, telling my biocomputer over and over again that I own a Rolls Royce. And as I was driving around, I used to hit the steering wheel, thump, 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 and I make a tune up, you see. I own a Rolls Royce, I own a Rolls Royce, I own a... They're driving everywhere. I own a... Shouting it out there, programming my mind. Over and over again, everywhere I went, out loud as I could, programming my mind. I own a Rolls Royce, and hitting the steering wheel as I went. One day I was in Sutton, at the top of Sutton High Street, and I don't know if you know it, but it's a big steep hill, and I was belting down Sutton High Street, down the hill, hitting the steering wheel, I own a Rolls Royce, I own a Rolls Royce, and suddenly all the traffic in front of me stopped dead. And I nearly went up the guy, and I'm still going, I own a Rolls Royce, and all the traffic stopped, and I'm still going, I own a Rolls Royce, putting this program in my brain at a cellular level, over and over again. Still hitting the steering wheel, I own a Rolls Royce. And I looked out to the left, I had the presence of mind, I looked out to the left, and there was a bus stop full of people, and they were all peering in at me, looking at this idiot hitting his steering wheel. And I thought to myself then, I thought, I've got to do something different, because I'm still desperate to get this Rolls Royce, but it wasn't coming. And I thought, what have I got to do? I've got to, instead of, and this was kind of intuitively, I've got to do something different. Now I know I was just programming my left brain with words. I thought, what I've got to do is actually program my right brain and my left brain at the same time. So what I started to do is do something differently, and I actually pretended my Ford Escort was a Rolls Royce. Right? So I'd noticed people with Rolls Royces and Bentleys, they were pompous businessmen, all bloated out, and they used to drive around like that. So I started driving my Escort around everywhere I went, as though it was a Rolls Royce. And if there was a parking gap that wasn't 20 foot long that you couldn't get a Rolls Royce into, I'd just drive straight past it and find a big gap that you could reverse a Rolls Royce into. And if it was big enough, I'd park the Ford Escort in there and look at it, I knew it was a Rolls Royce. I used to live in Dorking, and my front drive had 2 oak gate posts, and I looked at them and I thought, when I got the Rolls Royce, when I sweep in there, one of those gate posts is going to get clobbered. So I dug it up, dug a hole 3 foot apart, set it in concrete, and then I thought, right, when I swing the Rolls Royce in there, won't hit the... So I'm really programming my brain over and over again. Now, on a weekend, I'd polish up the Ford Escort, but I'd polish it as though it was a Rolls Royce. And on the radiator grill of a Rolls Royce, you've got that little Spirit of Ecstasy. You know, the angel with the wings and the big what's-its, lovely. So I polished that up and pretend this Ford Escort was a Rolls Royce over and over again. To me, it was a Rolls Royce. And my next door neighbour used to be looking over the fence at me, wondering what this guy was doing, dancing around his Ford Escort, but to me it was a Rolls Royce. And when you start programming your mind at a cellular level, you start getting little ideas and hunches. And I got this little idea, just popped into my head, phone your PR guy and tell him you want a Rolls Royce. Now, it was just like a little still voice. Now, why would I phone my PR guy and tell him I want a Rolls Royce? Phone him up. I said, Win. I said, I've got to have a Rolls Royce. I've got to have it. He said, well, he says, you're not, and I didn't know he owned a Rolls Royce. I really didn't. He says, you're not going to believe this. He said, my Rolls Royce is up for sale. He says, I've sold it to a guy on a nothing down deal, and he's let me down. I've got all the finance facilities. The guy there's got the forms in, and he still doesn't want to take it away. He said, if you come along, talk to the finance guy, he'll put your name on those forms. You can drive that Rolls Royce from mine away for nothing down. So a few weeks later, I've got this lovely yellow Rolls Royce, and I'm really driving it around. I've transmuted the little Ford Escort into a Rolls Royce. And that was my first Rolls Royce. Now, just to close the loop on that, when I got it, it was a big yellow Rolls Royce, had a TV aerial on the back. It really looked the part. And of course, I drove it around and I enjoyed it, and I picked up women and I went to parties and did business deals. It was fantastic, driving around in the Rolls Royce. And one day, I went out to buy a print company. And I got to the road where this print company was, and for some reason or another, I couldn't get down to the end of the road where the print company was. So I parked my Rolls Royce at the wrong end of the road, okay? And I walked down to the print company. I didn't know this guy from Adam. I walked through the door, and it's sometimes in life you just click with people. We clicked immediately, and he said, oh, he says, I'm glad you're interested in my print company, you want to buy it, da, da, da. He says, why don't we go out for some lunch and talk out the deal over some lunch? I said, that's very nice of you. I said, what a lovely idea. He said, the restaurant I got in mind is just down the road. We'll walk down there. So I knew we were walking towards my Rolls Royce, and it was yellow and it was glossy and the chrome was shining. It looked immaculate. And I completely had it in my mind, when we got to it, I was just going to walk past it and ignore it. I wasn't going to say anything, nothing at all. Why would I? I was just going to walk past it. But when we got to it, he put his arm out across the pavement and he said, stop, stop. He said, look, he said, I hope you don't mind, but he says, that Rolls Royce, he says, that's my dream car. He said, I love it. He said, it's beautiful. What do you think? I said, do you like it? He said, like it? He said, I love it. I said, well, we'll nick it then. I said, we'll nick it. He said, what do you mean, nick it? I said, well, I don't mean nick it. I said, I've got a big bunch of keys. I said, if I can get it open up, I said, we'll only nick it, we'll go to the restaurant. I said, we'll bring it back. I said, I don't mean we nick it, we'll just borrow it. He says, you can't do that. I said, well, I can't even get in it yet. Oh, look, the door's open. His eyes bugged open, his mouth. What? And I said, well, I can't promise I can start it. Come round and jump in it. He jumped in with me. This complete stranger's going to nick this Rolls Royce with me. So then I said, well, hold on, I bet I can get it going with one of these keys. So I put the key in the ignition, and of course it burst into life. And we're off, and he looked at me, he said, it's yours, isn't it? Can you imagine a complete stranger wanting to nick a Rolls Royce? But he did, he was completely game for it. So just to close the loop on this visualization, and I know everybody here interested in making money and making things happen in their lives, but when I mentor somebody, I always teach them about business acumen, making their businesses happen, but more than anything about mind power. And it's this mind power that makes things happen. So just to close the loop on the Rolls Royce story, when I wanted this Rolls Royce, I won't mention his name, but I went to the top hypnotherapist in the UK, and I said, I want a Rolls Royce. I said, if you wanted a Rolls Royce, really desperate like I do, what's the program to put in your brain to ensure you get a Rolls Royce? And he immediately said, that's the easiest thing in the world. He said, if you want a Rolls Royce, I suggest to you, you know the Spirit of Ecstasy on the Rolls Royce grille? I said, absolutely. He said, well, if I was you, I'd visualise one of those, not the size that it is, about 6 or 8 inches, but visualise one about 3, 4 foot tall, a massive great one, over and over and over again. Put that in your brain at the cellular level. He said, that will get you your Rolls Royce. Now, if somebody tells me something about mind power, I immediately go out and do it. So what did I do? I visualised this Rolls Royce Spirit of Ecstasy, the one that goes on the radiator grill, not that big, but a huge one. I visualised it over and over and over again, right? I could really, really see it. I don't know how many of you know Hastings. One day, shortly after this, I was down in Hastings, and Hastings is a lovely southeast coast seaside town, and there's lots of little back roads with little bars, wine bars, antique shops, all bric-a-brac and everything, and it's a right mishmash of little lovely little shops. And I was walking through there with a colleague of mine, and what do you think I saw in the window of one of these antique shops? What do you think I saw? A massive Spirit of Ecstasy, and it was like a magnet. I was suckered in, I couldn't help myself. I went in, I said to the guy, I said, how much is that? It was right in the window. He said, it's $3,000. I said, you've got to buy it. And I had a couple of grand on me, my mate had $1,000, $3,000, boom, and we struggled to get it in the back of my little car, because this is what was obviously before I got my Rolls Royce. So I've suddenly got, like halfway there, I've got this massive statue. But I've proved it over and over again by visualising things. You attract them, the law of attraction, it makes things happen, and you make big things happen by visualisation. Very, very powerful. Everything I do is wealth. So I phoned the guy up for the domain name. I said, what I want is wealth, as in having lots of money, wealth.co.uk. How much is it? He said, well, I've got it. He said, it's $5. So what do you think I say? I'll have it. I'll have it. And he said, while I've got you on the phone, he says, I've also got wealth.com, right? What do you think I say? No, I didn't. Me in all my wisdom, I said to him, I said, no. I said, I'm only really mentoring and doing stuff in the UK. So I said, I don't really need that. He said, are you sure? I said, of course I'm sure. What do you think I'm, a complete idiot? I only look stupid. Right? No, I don't want it. So I paid my £5, boom. I got wealth.co.uk, and I've had the presence of mind to pay the 20 quid renewal fee, whatever it is, every year now for 12 or 13 years. I still own it. It's my main website. A few weeks ago, like 6 or 8 or 10 weeks ago, wealth.com sold for $4.9 million.
Wow.
But I've still got wealth.co. It was probably worth about half that, but 4.9 million. So there's another little nice internet story for you. A young girl who was fresh out of college, and she decided to become a journalist. And she took it very, very seriously. Wanted to write stories for the newspapers and everything. She became a journalist. And the first assignment she got from this newspaper, there was a billionaire guy out there who had made his money out of scrap metal. And she had to do the story about this guy and really write it up and da-da-da. And because this was her first story, she wanted to do a really, really good job of it. So instead of just going out for the interview, she did a bit of research on the guy to delve deep down before she interviewed him, so to make the conversation even better. So in her research, she discovered he was illiterate, couldn't read, couldn't write, he was dyslexic, he had real problems, yet he still became a billionaire. So armed with all of this information that he wasn't particularly well educated, she went out to do the interview to write up this lovely story about this guy who had made $1 billion out of scrap metal. So she thought, as she approached him, she thought, well, I'll go straight for the jugular and get to the bottom of the nitty-gritty. And she said, look, she said, I hope you don't mind, but she said, I am new to this, I'm a journalist, I'm brand new. She said, I did some research on you before this interview, and I want to ask you a very personal question. She said, I understand you can hardly read and write, you're illiterate, you're dyslexic. It's incredible to me you've become a billionaire selling scrap metal. She says, what I want to know is the secret of your success. Oh, he said, it's easy. He said, I can answer that. I'll tell you what it is. He said, I want you to listen very, very carefully. I buy scrap metal at $100 a ton, right? And he says, I sell the scrap metal for $300 a ton. He says, there's 2% for a start.